Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Willem Kraus from Knowledge Resources. Welcome to all of you to our launch of Tracy's new book, our latest title. Heartily welcome to all of you. I noticed quite a number of well-known faces or names, so to speak. I see two of our authors, Joan Peters and Louise van Rijn is there, and also Brand Pretorius I saw there, and Bernard there. And thank you very much to all of you for attending and making the time available. Guys, we're very excited with our latest publication, and even more so to partner with Tracy Swanepoel on the specific title, Leading for Engagement. So let me introduce Tracy to you quickly. Just one or two observations about her. She boasts an MBA from Henley. Her initial career, she started off, by the way, initially she was a professional tennis player, but that she can share with us later on. But a career in corporate started off in advertising and strategic planning, where she was with advertising companies like FCB, Ogilvy and Gray worldwide. Then she went to Harmony Gold, where she was involved in internal strategy, amongst others. 2008, she started her own consulting business, Thinkspiration, and where she now focuses mainly on strategy, culture, and leadership. And the one thing I want to emphasize is that she makes sure that she can translate complex concepts to make it very practical. Now, that only a master of the subject can do that, really. So, Tracy, welcome to us this afternoon. We're really excited about your new book. Just incidentally, guys, for those of you who would like to get a copy of the book, and I hope everyone will, you can go to our website and order there. There's a special for the book at the moment. It will be very soon on Amazon in an e-format, as well as the printed, and it will also at various retail stores. Tracy, tell us quickly, how did this book come about? And tell us more about the book and about engagement. Let's talk about engagement also, because it's a multi-billion-dollar industry today worldwide, and still we battle with it.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Wilhelm, and just afternoon to everybody that's joined. I must say it's a wonderful moment, and I really appreciate you giving up your time to share it with us. Finally, it is here. It feels like this book has taken 3 years, but probably another 30 years of thinking about it. So 3 years of writing and maybe 25 to 30 years of thinking about it. Just maybe a little bit of background about, as Wilhelm mentioned, I started my career in advertising as a strategic planner, and in that process, I became curious about internal communication and employee communication, because, as a strategist, you always ask the client, like, the key question is, what makes you different? And invariably, the answer to this would be, well, it's our people. I mean, our people are amazing and fantastic, and they are the difference. And I've sort of wondered about this and got curious and went and did a little bit of digging and investigated. And of course, the people were not as excited about this. So as part of my MBA dissertation, I looked at how can we actually apply some of the best practices of external communication and marketing to an internal employee audience. So concepts like brand creation, storytelling, segmentation, because really you're asking, as you are asking an external consumer to buy a product, you're asking your internal employee to pay with their discretionary effort and buy into the strategy, the culture, et cetera, et cetera. So that was great. And then I, at the age of 27, I was made head of our little department. And I was obviously extremely chuffed. I was, very excited about it, until I realized, and perhaps there are many people on this call that might share this feeling. I hope so. But I realized that, and it sort of slowly dawned on me, that my technical expertise, the skills that I had acquired up to then, that had actually got me there, were not the skills I needed to lead people, to lead this little group of people. I was completely at a loss. And I really didn't cover myself in glory, I have to admit. It was not a shining moment. And it sort of reminded me a little bit of, as Wilhelm mentioned, I did play tennis competitively, not professionally, but as an amateur in the States, in their NCAA league. And when that came to an end, I then did a bit of coaching. And you kind of assume, good tennis player, good coach. Not at all. Two completely different skill sets. So I really wished at the time that I had known what to do, that I had known, there was no manual, there was no rough guide to how to lead people, how to engage people. I missed it. So, I've been passionately pursuing that for the last many years in doing that. And then, Wilhelm, to your question of, where does this book come from, and how it links, to engagement. As you mentioned, I've been part of Thinkspiration for the last 14 years. It's a consulting business. And one of the great privileges that we've got, a real blessing, is that we have a ringside seat to many of the conversations that happen in lots of businesses in a variety of different industries. And I think where this book came from, on reflection, it really emerged from observations and observing conversations, observing what works, what doesn't work. But really, I sort of landed on 4 key insights that came from lots of conversations, lots of observations in terms of engagement. So the first insight, and I just want to share those with you as a bit of foundation. The first one is that when you listen to what the conversations are, whether it's at exco level, at senior management level, even at middle management level, the people, the managers, they're not talking about engagement. That is not the problem that they are needing to solve. It's not the immediate problem. They talk about the safety problem, the cost overrun, the lack of productivity, the absenteeism. And I started to realize that, underneath all of this, it's almost like this picture of an iceberg sort of popped into my mind is, underneath, those are the issues that we see, the sort of tip of the iceberg. But underneath it, it all relates back to the root cause of engagement. And, Gallup have done their meta-analysis, they've correlated all of these things. So the numbers, exist for that. The second insight that I had was very much along the lines of my own experience, is that leaders or people in leadership positions have not necessarily got there because they are exceptional leaders of people. They have got there because, as Tom Peters always talks about, they are insanely technically qualified. They are really good at what they do. So, the great engineer, the great actuary, the great CA. But as I personally discovered, that does not equip you how to get the best out of your people. So there's a real lack there, real gap there. Thirdly, I think all of us have got a sense of this, and it goes exactly to the engagement issue, is that generally the world of work out there is not the happiest place on earth. There are exceptions where people are purpose driven, they can connect their purpose to the overall purpose of the business. we actually blessed enough to work with some of them. But generally, there's sort of horror. I think of them as horror stories happening in the world of work. You know, I recall a conversation I had with a friend of mine who resigned from a big job in corporate banking, and big salary, big title. And she said to me, you know, I've never felt better. I'm free, I can do what I want to do. But actually the best thing is that I don't wake up every day thinking who is going to destroy me today. And finally, I then thought, you know, what is it that we are doing to try and address these problems? What are businesses doing to try and address these problems? And what I saw and observed is that in many cases, the levers that we've got at our disposal as businesses, you know, the strategy to inspire people, the culture, the great culture to make it a great place to work, or the leadership to connect with people, we actually are in many cases not helping the engagement problem, and in some instances actually actively you know, sort of harming it. So that's where the whole sort of idea, you know, I wanted to frame this, and that's where the seven sins idea sort of came from. But it's not doom and gloom, you know, it's not, I don't want that to be the message, because for each one of those, what I call sins, there's actually a commensurate secret that are all proved by research, by neuroscience, behavioral science, psychology, all the work that's being done as best practice in terms of how you actually lead people, how you make them productive, how you motivate people. So I wanted to focus on what are the secrets, and then what do you do? Like how do you go about this? How do you use them as a leader? Firstly, to lead yourself, because if you can't lead yourself, you really can't lead anybody else. And secondly, how do you use them to lead other people? So, you know, what are the sort of steps to happiness in terms of using these secrets and improving leadership? So that gives you like a little bit of background, a little bit of context where it sort of comes from.
Tracy, thank you very much, guys. To the audience, you are welcome to tap Tracy's brain here today. She is available for questions, comments. You can use the Q&A or the chat room if you would so prefer. Tracy, describe the culture of, from your own experience now, the culture of an organization which has a high engagement sort of score, so to speak. I mean, we know, for instance, I mean, I'm getting now to the retention side of engagement, or the impact that high engagement scores have on retention. Retention is with the great resignation that people are talking about. Very marketable skills can evaporate any day. But talk to us about the culture that you've, from your own experience.
You know, I think that culture, firstly, is you know, we talk about it as this very abstract concept, and I think culture is actually set by leaders with every, you know, little micro behavior, you know, that happens. So you can have all the great words and the lovely brochures and all of those things, but at the end of the day, it's how the leader actually behaves, what it feels like to work there. And I think that, you know, in terms of that, it would be a culture of, you know, really respect. It would be a culture of innovation. It would be a place where people feel connected to go the extra mile. You know, it's, again, leadership and the actual word engagement. I often think about it, and I think about like what picture comes into my head. And I think often of an engagement ring. You know, it's actually about a committed relationship. You know, often in business, they don't want you to use the L word, you know, love, but it's actually about emotional investment, where people are prepared to do more. They are invested. They want to give of themselves. And, you know, there's a reciprocal relationship there, because they find themselves in a place where they can actually play to their strengths, live out their potential, fulfill their destiny. So I think it's all about that. But essentially, you know, it's not something that can be outsourced. And that's the thing, every single leader in charge of every group, or his or her team, actually determines that. They determine the atmosphere. In my book, I talk about, as a leader, you take the weather with you. Like the emotional climate, how you're feeling that day influences how you actually are going to interact with your team. And I just thought of, it just reminded me of a conversation I had with a plant manager probably about a year ago now, Johan, a metallurgist, and he's been in charge of running a plant, for probably like 15, 20 years. And he said to me, when I first started running the plant, I thought it's a maths problem. Numbers are going to solve this, let's look at all the issues. Then he said, no, I realized it's not that, it's an engineering problem. And the systems are going to sort it out. And he said, I've come to realize it's actually always about the people. And it's up to me as a leader, how I actually put the effort in and engage people. So, I don't want to say the bad news, it shouldn't be bad news, but for me, the bottom line is it takes effort, it takes energy, it takes consciousness as a leader to be able to do this, like any relationship does. It's really about being aware.
Okay, fantastic. Now, share with us, not all 7, but because the people must buy the book to get hold of all 7 sins and 7 secrets. But share with us, say, about 2 of them. Okay, perfect. And to be sharing all 7, you're right, that would take hours, and they won't buy the book, so we won't do that. Let me share probably 2 that I think are particularly prevalent. The first one is what I call SOSing. SOS stands for send out stuff. SOS is we send out stuff to people, and we hope that it makes some kind of difference. So when I say send out stuff, that is the email, all the paraphernalia that we produce with actually the best intentions. I've seen beautiful PowerPoint presentations, corporate brochures, emails from, the CEO, whatever it might be. Best practice science actually tells us that people don't internalize a message unless they have talked about it. So we don't. So the sin is SOS, sending out stuff. And the secret is actually allowing people to talk about it, facilitating dialogue, which is really the oxygen of change. So giving people a sense of, how they are connecting to this, how they are interpreting. But we kind of just, on SOS all the time. And then I think we wonder, well, why aren't people getting this? Why aren't people getting, how come they don't know the strategy stuff? We've sent it out, we've ticked the box, we feel better about it. So that's one. The other one is jargonizing, I call it, jargonizing as opposed to using business stories, which are not that we have to be storytellers, we don't have to be sort of Netflix or Hollywood, but we actually need to make things concrete and memorable and impactful. So to give you an example of jargonizing, just bear with me for a minute, because I actually cannot remember this. I really can't. It's in the book, so I'm going to read it out to you. Imagine this statement. Our product integrates digital systems and orientates you towards reimagination so that innovation is not restricted. That is actually a real life example, which, that's why I have to read it out to you. I don't know what that means. That doesn't help me. It's not inspiring. It's not connecting to people. So, a lot of times, we've got little icons in the book of for each sin and each secret, and our icon for jargonizing is acronym soup. It's just, all those acronyms. Some companies actually have an appendix of like all the acronyms that they use. And it's a pity, because people out there that need to understand this, the employees that need to be engaged and with this, are not
remembering, well, I mean, are not getting this because firstly, it doesn't make sense. They can't remember it. It's not something that they can relate to at all.
Wonderful. I want to emphasize again just something that you mentioned glibly, and that is dialogue is the oxygen of change. I really like that. Okay, we've got quite a few comments or questions here, Tracy, coming up. So let me get there. Well, this is very important. Talk about growing a relationship given the virtual working environment, or then let's say the hybrid, where we are physically removed from people. And then we can link it to some of the solutions that you would like to propose to HR practitioners, yes, to enable them to drive engagement discussion in the boardroom as a business priority.
Brilliant. Fantastic. So I think one of the, I suppose I don't want to say the benefits of the pandemic, but one of the unexpected realizations that it brought about is it was a sharp sort of stake in the ground in terms of the way everything's been going, the world of work's been going. So suddenly it stopped and it was different. And what is interesting is what happened around that, and some of my observations, which I share in the book around that, is that people became a lot more conscious of emotions, of just the little human interaction because you can't just take it for granted. You're not just going to bump into someone and have a good chat with them. So leaders were, and obviously it was a very emotional time for everybody. So when I was chatting to some leaders during that particular time, you are physically distant, but you need to actually work harder to be more emotionally connected. You need to be more emotionally tuned in to where people are. The other issue that I think came up very strongly is this sense of autonomy. So obviously you don't report to the office, you're not seen to be working, and I think that actually there was a little bit of a bump in engagement that came through then. And my interpretation of it was actually about autonomy. People loved the freedom to actually work as they wanted to fit work in, to feel trusted. That really worked well. Of course, on the converse of that, not all companies cover themselves in glory there. I mean, there were some horrific things about, how your boss would sort of monitor you, how often you were online or whatever. And I think that is the antithesis of something that's going to inspire and engage people. So I think the pandemic was a really good, stop the roundabout here and let's see what's important. And for me, it really was a focus on leaders need to understand how important emotions are, how to use their emotions, how to also be vulnerable and authentic, and how to say, you know what, I've never done this before. I don't know the answers. Please help. And the leaders that I saw doing that just flew, just had, such engaged people. They're amazing stories in terms of things that we saw happen in that time.
Okay, great. I just want to see on the question side. Mark is asking here, having benefits from the Riptide Leadership book, that's incidentally, for those who don't know, Tracy's first book, how can I expect this book to build on that work and journey?
Fantastic. Thanks so much for that question. So, in the Riptide book, the idea there was to really say, what is it? We don't seem to be making progress. And what are the best practices that we know science actually proves work in terms of inspiring and motivating people? So we need to do more of those. And, so it was really shining a light on what to change. So in terms of this book now, and you know, the feedback on that book was great, and a lot of we actually developed a course of you know, how people could, you know, actually implement that. But a lot of the feedback was, well, what can we actually do? Like, what is actionable? What are the steps? You know, the steps to happiness, and that is really the focus of this book. So, you know, part one is identifying the 7 sins and the 7 secrets, and obviously shining a light on them. But very importantly, it's to say, you know, part two, as a leader, leading yourself, what is it that you actually need to do? So to give you an idea, you need to be brave enough to be authentic and vulnerable. You need to, in order to do that, you need to kind of know yourself and your emotions and how you use them to lead. Secondly, you need to, I probably rudely say, shut up and listen, but really listen, really, really listen to people. It's life-changing when you do that. And thirdly, connect using the power of story. So that's just in leading yourself. The third bit, the third part of the book, leading others, has also got 4 steps to happiness, as I call them, that are very practical, very actionable. And what I wanted to share in this book was, you know, this is like tried and tested and hard-won sort of knowledge through experience that for years and years we've tried, we've looked, we've seen, and this is really the distillation of those practices that we see over and over again actually deliver the results.
Good, thank you, Tracy. There are a couple of questions around love in the workplace. So if I can just go there quickly. This is Dorian asks, what does love look like in an organization? Is it different to any other environment? I think that should give us some answers. All right, so, and then the other one is, so what does love look like in an organization? And then Simon asks, I'm interested in the love aspect as well. Some of us are more task-oriented. How do we balance these emotional needs of people while achieving outstanding results? That's tough.
Okay, so yes, indeed. So I think that, you know, you can't force people into doing things. You know, you can't. You know, love talks about emotion, two-way emotions. And of course, when I say love, I'm talking about a very connected relationship. So I think what love looks like is actually, firstly, as a leader, knowing your own strengths, knowing who you are, and being open to actually understanding where your team come from, looking at them in terms of their strengths. You know, a positive relationship is very much, you know, driven by the good things that you see. And I think that in a lot of organizations, we tend to focus on what's not there. You know, I call it like the perfect 10 employee. You know, it's like you have to have that, and that. There's a list, and then we will tick off all the boxes. And humans aren't like that. Everybody's unique. So I think a big part of love is actually knowing and appreciating the people that are working with you as a leader, and knowing what their strengths are and actually appreciating them for strengths. You know, we do, whenever we do workshops, we use a little exercise where we, you know, ask the people to appreciate each other and say why they're happy to have them on their team. And usually, you know, you sort of explain this, and you can see, especially in the more, you know, the kind of resource industries, the more male-dominated industries, the guys are like cringing, like, oh, you know, and it's so important because we don't actually take time to say, you know what, I really appreciate the way that you XYZ. I'm so glad I have you on my team because you. So, I mean, I'm not talking about like going on date night, but I'm talking about that relationship. Love is also, you know, I mean, listening is a part of love, I believe. You know, it's really about hearing someone else's perspective, but but really opening yourself up, not being defensive, not doing, we all know how important listening is, and we've been on the courses, and you need to lean forward and knit your eyebrows and purse your lips. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about that desire to go into someone else's world and see the issue from their point of view. It's so hard to do that. It's hard because there's a danger that I think we all unconsciously kind of have, we haven't even recognized it. But if you open yourself up to someone else's point of view, they might change your mind. Then what? But I think people need to be listened to. I think they need to be appreciated. And I think they need to be valued for their strengths that they're bringing to the table, not, chastised or, marked down or for what they don't have. And I think there's not enough of that. And hence we see the results with engagement.
Great. Thank you very much. Sean, I think Tracy has answered that question of yours and some of Gilles also to an extent. If you're not happy with the answers, then come back to us. And then Mark said here, good leaders don't use people. Let me get there. People to deliver a product. They use the product to deliver people, as coaches use a game to develop their people. We are focused on the scoreboard as opposed to focus on the players. They will win the game. Any comments on that? You happy with that?
Well, you know what? I can just relate that straight back to, my tennis days. Is you never focus, if you want to win a match, you actually focus on the next point. You focus on what you are doing. You focus on you don't focus on, you don't sort of imagine you don't sort of like think about the score that you would want to achieve in 4 games time. So I think that is very important, to focus on the people, and to really, understand the people, to take time with people, because that is really the essence of engagement. I mean, the other thing that I think is really important, which is in the third part of the book, is to paint a really compelling picture of the future that you want to create as a leader. Leaders are dealers in hope. We should be. People are looking to us for hope, for where are we going? And particularly when things get rough, when things are difficult, what is it that keeps you going? And again, going back to my tennis days, I dreamed that I would win Wimbledon. Okay, we all know I didn't. But that dream, that picture in my head was the thing that kept me going. It kept me practicing. It kept me believing. It kept me doing hard stuff. It kept me going when I was going through a slump. It kept me going when I was injured. And that picture of the future is absolutely vital in terms of engaging people, tapping into their emotions and giving them hope.
Okay, thank you. Andre Hubert says, hi Tracy, can give us more detail on how one can really introduce these concepts to a mind where the relationships are strained. The leader is brand new and there's a huge pressure to perform. Surely buying them a book will not be the answer. No, Andre, I disagree. You buy them 2 each. And then you give Tracy a call. Do you want to give a
Andre, and I will take this offline. Andre, thanks for your question. But I think, obviously it's a process, and it's not as, it is laid out as clearly as I was able to lay it out in the book. But some of the principles are that first one I've just talked about. What does the future actually look like? What is that dream? And making that compelling. Making it, something that you attach to emotionally. I mean, I know we talk about vision and mission, and that's great, but going into the future and describing it, and then using that ability of hindsight to sort of look back on today and say, you know what, that's what we need to do. So that's important. Second, we're talking about a mind, talking about practical, is there is no substitute for listening to people, for going to where people are. So you first need the dream, then you need to go and understand the reality of where people are, how are they thinking about, how do they see things, because you need to actually, to take them forward, you need to actually connect with them. You need to go to where they are, and talk about that and address some of those issues. And then it's about actually shaping this into what I talk about as a compelling story, of really distilling it. And I also talk in my book about the power of visualizing it. Visuals really, and I'm not saying that, you know, we all visual, we all relate to visuals, and visuals really help to concretize, to simplify. So we use analogies where we talk about the mountain we're going to climb, or the race that we need to run, and people actually start relating to that because it's much more concrete. The fourth thing is, you know, how do you get this? How do you get people to buy into this? How do you get them to own it? And that is, the secret is really about empowering your leaders at all levels to be able to have conversations, which, as you know, Wilhelm mentioned earlier, that's where that internalization, the oxygen of change comes into it, because people can then engage with these concepts and actually talk about them and say, no, I didn't understand it like that. I understood it like this. And that's where you start having actual real conversations in a business, as opposed to what happens a lot is there's that PowerPoint presentation somewhere, or, you know, a thick file of documents, and it sort of gathers dust on someone's desk. It's a tragedy. Nobody knows about that, but there is a better way of doing it that we see work really well.
Thank you. Tracy, thanks for that. I'm going to combine the next two questions, one from Jennifer and the other one from Bernardo. So Jennifer is asking, I was listening to a podcast today in which the speaker suggested that leaders should want to be effective, not right. How do you encourage leaders to show that vulnerability? And then Bernardo says, the old saying is culture eats strategy for breakfast. In your experience, is a high level of employee engagement one of the intentional leadership objectives that can have a positive effect on organizational culture?
So let me deal with the last question first, because absolutely and for sure, I think that, you know, I really think that I think that the integration of strategy, culture, and leadership is really key in this regard. So your strategy paints the exciting picture of the future, what we want to become, where we're going. Your culture is, what does it feel like to be part of this? What is it like? What does it feel like? And your leader needs to, on a daily basis, be leading towards that, be talking about that in their meetings, so it needs to be something that is deliberate, that is driven. And when we see that happen, we see the results that go with it. The Jennifer question about leaders not always needing to be right and how to show that vulnerability, it's a tough one, because I think our model of leadership, or, you know, the way that people progress through the hierarchy is really about, I need, in a lot of cases, not in all cases, because so most people on this call don't do this, but it's that I need to always be right. I need to have the answers. Many years ago, I remember having a conversation with a client, and I was trying to encourage him to listen more, to just, you know, do listening sessions, to ask people what they think. And, you know, I've never forgotten what he said to me. He said, but if I ask them what they think, they're going to think I don't know. You know, I'm asking them, you know, I don't know the answer. And I think that's, you know, it sounds bizarre, but actually leaders need to be comfortable with not knowing all the answers. And I think going back to the previous point about COVID, that was like a relief. That was a huge, you know, it was like, we've never faced this before. We don't know. I think leaders just saying, I don't know. And then the 4 words that I think are magic for any leader to ask, what do you think? Like that, you know, and then listen to the answer. I think it's, you know, as Jennifer points out, it's not like it's going to happen like the flick of a switch. But I think it's leaders sort of realizing that also they don't have to carry this around, this burden of always knowing everything, because how can you? And also then tapping into the resource, the amazing resource that are your people, that actually all have different perspectives, all have a different view. And, you know, we do listening sessions in organizations, and I cannot tell you every single time I walk away from these they're one-on-ones where you just ask people literally, what do you think? And it's a structured conversation. I walk away completely inspired. And every time I want to say, but you sort of we become like the conduit back to the leader and say these smart things. And they say, oh, that's a smart insight. It's not from us, it's from your people. So that, like, really getting to ask people what they think about the business, getting them engaged in thinking about the business is, I think, very powerful.
Mm. Thank you. Tina, just a quick comment that I want to, or a request rather, is post the link again so people can order the book, because I mean, they are now tapping Tracy's brain here for the price of a book, and they can just as well buy the book. So Sandra asked this question, Tracy. Can you talk more about your experience of impacting engagement from a board and exco level, where she says, I often see engagement being pushed down to HR rather than owned by leaders? I think that's a very important question.
Absolutely. You know, I think HR play an incredibly pivotal role in terms of being the conscience, you know, being the knowledge base, driving the right behaviors, sometimes even putting together, you know, the support system, the processes, but, you know, the cheerleaders. I mean, it's more than that. But really, you know, that should conscience. They should be the conscience. But at the end of the day, we go to extreme lengths. And some of my clients that are on this call will know this is a huge thing, that it has to be owned by line. And I mean, there is no substitute for that. You know, sometimes when we have a rollout of a visual map, that, you know, the leaders need to have conversations with their teams. There's always the temptation to say, you know, can you guys come in and do it? Can Thinkspiration come in and have that conversation? You know what, maybe it's technically better, but you know, people that work for a leader want to hear them talk about the business. So it's about constantly reinforcing that and almost you know, sort of sensitizing leaders to, like, this is what you need to do here. But having said that, you don't want to make it onerous. You don't want to make it like, oh my gosh, because this poor CEO or COO, whatever, has got a huge amount of other stuff on their desk. You want to make it easy for them. And in fact, just last week, we had a rollout process where the leader just was phenomenal, probably did it the best I've ever seen. And in our sort of communication afterwards, you know, I said, like, well done, and, you know, whatever. And he said, you know, I found it really easy, which for me was really, you know, really satisfying, because you don't want to make it something that's so difficult that just becomes like, oh, let's just avoid that and do the stuff I know how to do. So I think HR have got an absolute pivotal role to play in this being the sort of issue, the top of mind issue, and then, you know, taking leaders into the right process, helping them, making it simple, making it an easy process for them to be able to have these conversations. Because once they've gone down that route, they will see that it really pays dividends. It is worth it, and it's repeatable. It's not like it's a one-off thing. It's actually a different way of going forward.
Tracy, let's go back to the book. The book is there's a lot of visuals and illustrations in the book, and it's very practical. You mentioned earlier about visual management as well, and using visuals in your approach to change organizations. Tell us a bit more about that, and some background to some of the visuals.
Yes, so so the book is, well, firstly, in terms of style, I guess, in terms of like my writing style, it's very conversational. It's really probably how I speak in day-to-day conversation. Although it's based on very solid academic research, it's not academically oriented. For me, it's about, as I said, what I wanted when I was 27, I wanted a guidebook. I wanted like the rough guide to being a great leader and engaging my people. So with that in mind, visually, visually, hopefully sends the message that there are pull quotes, there are highlights. I would love for people to use this as a manual, to write in it their ideas, to stick post-its in it. In the second section where I talk about leading yourself, there's sort of journaling questions that I thought it would be useful for leaders to actually reflect on and ask themselves. So there's a little bit of a journaling component on it, in it. And then the part about the visual maps, just to show people an example. It's very difficult to see what they really look like, because obviously they have to be scaled down to the size of a book. But in terms of sort of examples, I've used 2 examples of how we've applied the process to a specific client environment, and what how those visuals are actually used in that regard. So it just gives people, it's not going to do what a big visual does. You can see some visuals behind me. I know one of my clients is going to be particularly upset with me because their visual is not behind me, but it didn't fit. But yeah, so a big visual, the whole process is something that is described, but you can't really see the detail, but it does give readers an idea of what a visual map looks like, and the analogy that we use in specific cases.
Thanks a lot, guys. There are people who've got their hands up. You can pose your question in the or comment in the chat if you wish to do so, or the Q&A. Yeah, my point is that my take on the book is it's very, very practical, and it reads easily. Well, let's use the word, it engages you to read the book. So
Thank you.
It's wonderful.
That's high praise.
So we had 2 tough years in this country with the lockdowns and COVID and so on. You found the energy and inspirations to write a book. Tell us a bit. We're now getting more personal here. Tell us what kept you going during this period of time, and where did you find the sort of inspiration, and then lastly, what gives you hope?
So yeah, firstly the inspiration. I think I started writing this book before lockdown hit, and then we actually relocated to a farm just outside Polokwane. So there was literally, it's like, if you could think of a more idyllic setting to write, you can't get that. But still, as anyone that writes knows, it's actually really difficult to knuckle down and do it. So I think what this was, a sort of labor of trying to distill what I was thinking, what I had observed, what the real practical outcomes could be in that process. So I sort of almost sometimes write to find out what I think. So I wrote quite a lot during lockdown, and then I looked back at it and thought, and Bernard and I, obviously, who's my husband and my business partner, and yeah, and really my inspiration in terms of what leadership looks like. I guess we walked so much. We walked and talked and like pulled this apart and put it back together so many times. And I think through that process, you refine and you distill and you sort of get to where you feel like you've got something that is meaningful. So lockdown was an amazing, blissful time to actually just have that space and be out of the sort of everyday meetings and everyday interactions that I would have had, in normal life. So what gives me hope? Every time we interact with a client, and you just see the uniqueness, the strengths, how they are thinking about, and I'm talking at all levels. Sometimes we have workshops with the senior leadership team. Sometimes it's a listening session with someone that's, right at the sort of shop floor or rock face. But, I've never walked away from any single interaction ever thinking anything other than people wake up in the morning and they want to do their best. And that gives me hope. Everybody, yes, somewhere along the lines it sometimes goes awry, but every single person that works for a company actually has good intentions. And that's what we have to remember. And that's what we have to actually, connect with. So that gives me hope.
Fantastic. Tracy, there's one comment or question here, and then we're wrapping up. Which is your favorite visual map and why?
I wonder who is that from? You have to tell me, because now I have to Google it.
It's Wezo.
Oh, Wezo. Okay. Now this is all I can say in answer to this is that I think visual maps are a little bit like children. You love them all. You think you're going to love the last one, and then you do another one and you love that one. So I can't answer that, because each one, has a very special place in my heart. But I think the ones that stand out are the ones where they have, the client have actually really taken it to the next level in terms of how they've owned it, how they roll it out, how much they love it. So yeah, I can't answer. So I'm not going to answer that question. But I love all of them equally in different ways. But it's all about the rollout and the how it's owned by the people at the end of the day.
Super, thank you. So the one thing that COVID has taught us within our organizations is that the human being is at the center, and that there's general consensus now that we should create more human-centric organizations, and organizations which has a real purpose, and we must create a meaning in our organizations. And I'm absolutely convinced that focusing on engagement is a fantastic, I don't want to call it tool, because then I simplify it too much, but I mean to work towards to real engagement in organizations is one way of creating more meaning and a purpose, or for purpose and meaning to play out in the organization. So Tracy, thank you very much for your book. I mean, it's a great piece of work. We're very proud to be associated with it. And then there's a lot of work going into this book, and for that we salute you. I'm always admiring people who are prepared to plow back, to share their knowledge. I mean, they can never in South Africa retire or become rich by writing a book. That's not going to happen. But nevertheless, despite that, they still share their knowledge and expertise and build a better society. For that, we thank you very much. And then,
thanks, Wilhelm.
And then I also want to thank everybody who attended here tonight. We really appreciate you, and for participating so lively. We really enjoyed that. and then to Tina, who organized the launch. Thanks a lot, Tina. And then obviously also Sia. Sia, you can you put on your camera, a video camera. So Sia runs our publishing site, and so she's the mother of this book at a different level. Sia, thank you very much to you as well, and Katie also for being the backup on the technology side. So guys, enjoy your evening. I strongly recommend that you buy the book as soon as possible.
Thank you. Can I just thank from my side, you know, when you said to me what it takes to, you know, to write a book, you know, what it takes to write a book is one thing, but what it takes to actually birth it. And I really just want to extend my appreciation to you, to Sandra for connecting us, to you and your whole team, and also to my team that literally, you know, it's like they say it takes a village to raise a child. I think it takes a village to get a book out there. So to you know, to Sandy, my designer, to Lisa, to Jonita, and, you know, especially to Bernard, who literally walked lots of miles for this book. I just want to thank all of you, and to Zach, my 16-year-old son, who always nagged me, don't you have a book to write, mommy? So thanks for that.
Okay, great. No, I also want to thank Bernard for that fantastic foreword that he wrote, and to your team, as you mentioned, Sandy and the team. Thanks a lot, and have a great evening, guys. We enjoyed interacting with you, and until we talk again, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for attending. Really appreciate it.
Good.